Hello, welcome. Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today we start Block 4 Perspective on Class, Caste and Gender. Unit 13 Agrarian Classes and Categories. Agrarian societies are those settlements and groupings of people where livelihood is primarily earned by cultivating land and by carrying out related activities like animal husbandry, agricultural production, or cultivation is obviously an economic activity. However, like all other economic activities, agriculture production is carried out in a framework of social relationships. Those involved in cultivation of land also interact with each other in different social capacities. Not only do they interact with each other, but they also have to regulate interface with various other categories of people who provide them different types of services required for cultivation of land. For example, in the old system of Jajmani relations in the Indian countryside, those who owned the cultivated land had to depend for various services required at different stages of cultivation on the members of different caste groups. In exchange, the cultivators were obliged to pay a share of farm produce to the families that served them. As is the case with other social interaction, all these exchanges are carried out in an institutional framework. The most important aspect of the institutional setup of agrarian society is the patterns of land ownership and the nature of relationship among those who own or possess land and those who cultivate them. Those who owned agricultural land do not always cultivate it themselves and often lease it out to tenants or sharecroppers. Similarly, those who cultivate their own land or leased in land from others often employ laborers. The terms of employment of labor also vary. Some could employ labor on regular basis, some on casual basis, and some others could do so on contractual basis. The form of employment of labor and the nature of relationship that labor has with employer, farmers, or landowners are important aspects of a given agrarian structure. Agrarian structure and the land ownership patterns in a given society evolve historically over a long period of time. Those who own land invariably command a considerable degree of power and prestige in rural society. These sets a relationship among the owners of the land and those who provide various forms of services to the land owning groups of work with them for a ways could be described as an agrarian class structure. Now let us move to the next point, Marx and Weber on class. A category of people are often described as a class if they share some common properties in a given production process. However, all those involved in the agrarian process in a given society need not constitute a class. Some of them could merely be a category of population with a set of socially defined attributes. The classical sociological thinker Karl Marx and Max Weber wrote a great deal on the concept of class. Class was the most important conceptual category for Karl Marx in his analysis of human history and in his theory of change. Marx's model of class is a dichotomous one. It is through the concept of class that he explains the exploitation of subordinate categories by the dominant classes. According to Marx, in every class society, there are two fundamental classes. Property relations constitute the axis of this dichotomous system. A minority of non-producers who control the means of production are able to use this position of control to extract from the majority of the producers the surplus product. Classes in the Marxian framework are thus defined in terms of the relationships that a grouping of people have with the means of production. Further, in the Marx model, economic domination is tied to political domination. Control of means of production yields political power. Though Max Weber agreed with the Marx on the point that classes are essentially defined in economic terms, his overall treatment of the concept is quite different from that of Marx. Unlike Marx, he argues that classes develop only in the market economies in which individuals compete with economic gains. He defines classes as groups of people who share similar position in the market economy and by virtue of this fact receive similar economic rewards. Thus, class status of a person in Weber's terminology is his market situation, or in other words, his purchasing power. The class status of a person also determines his life chances. Their economic position or class situation determines how many of the things considered desirable in their society they can buy. Thus, in Weberian framework, the concept of class could not be applied to pre-capitalist peasant society where the market is only a peripheral phenomenon. However, in the Marxist theory of history, the concept of class is applicable to all surplus producing societies. But in his own writing, Marx focused mostly on the urban industrial or capitalist society of the West. It was left to the later Marxists, particularly Lenin and Mao, to apply the concept of class to the analysis of agrarian societies. Now let us move to the next point, notions of agrarian societies. In the modern industrial society, the nature of class structure is in some way common everywhere. It is also easier to identify various class groups, such as the working class, the industrialist, and the middle classes, in urban industrial societies. The social structures of agrarian societies are, however, marked by diversities of various kinds. The nature of agrarian class structure varies a great deal from region to region. The situation is made even more complex by the fact that in recent times the agrarian structures in most societies have been experiencing fundamental transformations. In most developed societies of the West, agriculture has become a rather marginal sector of the economy, employing only a very small proportion of their working population. Though the significance of agriculture has considerably declined in countries of the Third World too, it continues to employ a large portion of their population. Thus, to develop a meaningful understanding of the agrarian social structure, we need to keep in mind the fact that there is no single model of agrarian class structure that can be applied to all societies. Further, there are several different perspectives on subject. There is a very influential group of scholars in the field of agrarian studies who are critical of analyzing agrarian society in class terms. Peasant societies for them are a type of population fundamentally different from the modern urban industrial societies. The classical anthropological writings on the subject conceptualized peasant societies in similar populist terms. Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.